to Seymour from the Front Pew podcast, coming to you from the broadcast studio at Seymour First Baptist Church in Seymour, Tennessee, and featuring thoughts and discussions around loving God, loving others, making disciples, and living the life. I am your host, Tiger Brooks, and now on to the podcast.
Well, actually, I am not Tiger Brooks, and I am not full-time host, but today, your stand-in host, I am Austin Clark, and that is because the subject today's podcast bonus episode, as we've been walking through the different ministerial staff here at Seymour First Baptist, the interviewer has become the interviewee, and so I am here to get to know the man, the myth, and the legend, Dr. Tiger Thomas Brooks.
This ought to be fun. I do still have this button. In case you
I don't expect to have to say that much.
In case you have to, ask a question that I don't like. But yeah, so the turntables.
The turntables have turned. Yes, so we are here to get to know the Kingsport native Tiger Brooks. Mm-hmm. And so somehow that became my job, being the interviewer. And so let us begin when you were just a glimmer in
my daddy's eye.
In your daddy's eye.
So, mom and dad. Dad was 43 when I was born. My mom was 37. And so I was the second child. My sister is 13 and a half years, almost 14 years older than me. And so it became a little bit of a joke. I was probably not the most planned child that's ever lived, but that was the case. And so my dad was a service station dealer. I might as well just get this out there. How I got Tiger. Yeah. My dad was a service station dealer, Exxon, Tom Brooks Exxon, for 48 years. And at the time that I was born, put a tiger in your tank was the catchphrase. It was the slogan that Exxon, Esso at that time, it had not even changed to Exxon yet. And so put a tiger in your tank was the thing. And so mom was pregnant with me, and my dad and mom, they were jokesters. And so in social circles, mom would say that Tom, my dad, put a tiger in her tank. And she, at the time, was the manager of the Holiday Inn in Kingsport. And so on the day that I was born, the marquee out, the big, used to have one of these big Holiday Inn marquees. And the marquee out front said, "Congratulations, Tom and Rose Brooks, Thomas Tiger Brooks Jr., 8 pounds, 12 ounces, blah, 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 blah." So from that time, literally the time I was born, everybody just called me Tiger.
Did you come out with a full beard?
No, I did not. I did not. But yeah, anyway, when I was born, they obviously were established in their worlds as kids. Dad was born in Hawkins County, kind of the Clouds Creek area of Hawkins County near Rogersville. Mom was born in just across the line in Southwest Virginia. As kids, they grew up in churches. They grew up in a culture and in families that loved Jesus. Both of them were a part of singing families. My mom had 2 siblings. There was 3 daughters, 3 sisters, and they all sang. My grandfather sang and was bass baritone, and people say that's where I get a lot of my stuff. And so grew up in church. As a young married couple, they were involved in church. My sister was brought to church, and that was a regular thing. Somewhere along the way, as success came in business or whatever, they got out of church. They really never got a great explanation as to how that happened. But before I came along, or as I was coming along, mom and dad they just didn't, church was not part of life. So I didn't grow up in church. So the only church exposure that I got was when my aunt and uncle and cousin would pick me up and take me, to Vacation Bible School a few times. They would take me to church, go to Sunday school a few times, but not anything remotely regular. Now, with that said, God was still a topic that we talked about. We would sing. When we get together for family reunions and things like that, we would all sing gospel songs and things. And so it was never something that was foreign. It was just not a regular part of my life as a kid. We spent Sundays at Boone Lake in East Tennessee. And so as I was growing up into my young teenage years and such, there were times I can remember going to, you mentioned in your episode, going to revivals and going to meetings and evangelistic events and stuff because of your dad's ties and everything. And I went to a few of those things too. And I really, looking back on it, am pretty convinced that I probably had made a decision and trusted Jesus at a younger age than I actually give credit to when I'm about to get there. And yet, still didn't understand what having a relationship with Jesus was about until I got to be 16 and I could drive myself. Started going to church, started going to the church that I would occasionally attend, Calvary Baptist Church, which is the first church I began to serve later on. But I went to church because there were good looking girls in the youth group and, very noble reasons like that. And so after I kind of got going and I started attending regularly just on my own as I drove myself, we went to the Youth Evangelism Conference in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And that was when it was still held. No, it was not in Murfreesboro. It was in Nashville still, at Vanderbilt in the Memorial Center there. Terrible location. But there it was. And on this particular occasion, the singing, the worship was being led by, at that time, a relatively new group called New Song. New Song, which has been around for decades now. And they were leading worship and Arise, My Love. That was when that was
exactly
okay,
what I was.
That's what you think
resisting
about.
the urge to sing that when you.
I love that song. To this day, I still weep every time I hear it. It's kind of like God Bless the USA is to melody. The Arise, My Love is for me. Where are your shackles? Okay, anyway. So they sang a song that never did make it as big as Arise, My Love. They sang kind of a silly song in retrospect, but it was a song that just nailed me between the eyes. And the song was, Good Old Boys Don't Always Get to Heaven. And as you may imagine, the crux of it was, you just can't be good enough. I remember making conscious decisions as I was growing up. And if you could go back and poll people that were in elementary school and middle school with me, they would tell you that I was a pretty good guy. I mean, I was not a bully, though I got in trouble as a kindergartner because I was a lot bigger than everybody else. And I was just didn't know my own strength kind of things, but I wasn't mean about it. And I tried to be a good person. My mom and dad raised me right. And I tried to help little old ladies across the street, tried to be, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, that kind of thing. And I thought by being good, I could please God. If I was a good person, then he'd let me into heaven. And I had these thoughts growing up. But that song really made me think about the fact that, and I was becoming more and more involved in church and reading my Bible more. And I realized being a Christian was more than just intellectual assent to that fact that God exists and Jesus is his son, that I had to trust him for my salvation. I had to have a relationship with him and walk with him. And so I came back from that occasion, and that was back still when on Sunday nights, the youth would come back and they would share on Sunday nights, have a share service. So this is what we learned at YEC, you know? And I actually came and I basically preached kind of shared the message that really impacted me. That Ike Reichard was his name. He was an evangelist, and he shared a message in a way that was appealing to me, in a way that was engaging for me, because I was like, I like the way, because he was animated and he put some stuff into it that was just beyond just stand at the pulpit and say some things. And so it impacted me. The whole weekend impacted me greatly. And I came back and I shared kind of what he shared. And after that, we had an invitation, and I went forward. And by this time, that was the day before I turned 17, and I was already sort of becoming a leader in the youth ministry. And most everybody there, because I had been showing up on occasions over several years, they just thought that I had been saved for a while, and it was a surprise to a lot of people. So from that day forward, I really threw myself into church and the whole deal, the whole youth experience, and it was wonderful. And that's where I met Paige. Her dad was the minister of music and education in that church, and we were in the same class and same, so we grew up together. We all ran around together, and so that's how I came to faith. And that would lead to my being a part of the youth group and learning a little bit more about how church operates and things like that, which would later lead to, God speaking to me about, ministry, that kind of thing. So this is where you ask a question.
I was going to say, that's the early years. So
yeah.
How old were you all when you and Paige started dating?
We started dating literally right after we graduated. We started
high school.
Right, yeah, high school.
Okay.
We started dating right after we graduated, and she was going to Carson Newman, and I was going to the University of Tennessee. And so she, we started dating and seeing each other regularly after, we'd been buddies for a long time. And so she matriculated at Carson Newman, and I went to live on campus at UT, and I just floundered. So again,
you've talked about that before.
Yeah.
You wound up going several different schools, right? Well,
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me pause on that. So high school, though, you were a football player.
Yeah.
Quite the football player, right?
I was decent. There were a couple of smaller schools that had sent letters. I got a letter from Philip Fulmer, University of Tennessee, wanting me to walk on. Richmond Spiders, University of Richmond, asked, was interested in maybe even offering a scholarship, but I didn't. It was at the point of my life having played since I was a little kid through high school. I just didn't want to do it anymore. I wasn't passionate at that time. Now, a year after I made the decision not to pursue that, I was like, dang, man, what if? What woulda, coulda, shoulda. But no, I wasn't pursuing football or anything like that. And so I guess that lends itself to me going to University of Tennessee without any real strong attachments there and urge. And again, my dad was a very successful businessman, had established a very respected business in Kingsport, and did well. I never wanted for anything growing up. We weren't rolling in it, but certainly didn't want for anything. And age wise, by the time I was coming into my 20s, he was coming into retirement, and it was just assumed that I was going to take over there. I literally started pumping gas for my dad when I was 10 years old, and I'm checking oil and gauging tires and doing all the things that you can think about at a filling station or gas station. And I kind of just fell into that thing of thinking I'm just going to take over this business. And so I went to school very naively thinking, what are they going to teach me down here about running a gas station that I don't already know? It's stupid. So I didn't have a lot of motivation to get up and go to the Hill with 300 of my closest friends to go to chemistry class at 8:00 on a Monday morning. So I didn't do that a whole lot. So about a year and a half in, I finally figured out I'm wasting Dad's money and I'm not doing anything with this. I hadn't found my niche, and I went back home. So started working full time at the station, and then going to school occasionally at different places up in East Tennessee, Northeast State, and went to ETSU for some classes and things, and finally just quit. Meanwhile, Paige stayed almost 3 years at Carson Newman, and she was pursuing music, but she was miserable there because she'd really never found her niche there. And so she relented, she was begging her dad to transfer to ETSU. And because of his Baptist background and ministry background, there were lots of scholarships and stuff that she was earning at Carson Newman. So it kind of offset a lot of the expense. But she was like, if I go and get a scholarship, will you let me go to ETSU? And he goes, all right. So she goes and she wins the biggest music scholarship that they offer at ETSU. And so he relents and she goes to go see ETSU. So we're still dating. I finally quit and just am working full time and telling people I don't need college. And in the meantime, God was just doing something in me about thinking about church from a vocational perspective. I was in my natural element, when we were doing church together, and I loved church people. I loved ministering to people and just trying to encourage people. And at some point, I think it was in June. Frank McCarter, still friends to this day. He's in his mid to late 90s now. Lives in Sevierville. Frank McCarter was filling in one night. He basically preached a message that really with the trajectory of if you feel called to the ministry. And I went forward and I surrendered to the ministry that night. I had no idea what it was going to look like. I tell people all the time, I've known a lot of little preacher boys that were mama called from the age of 3 to be a preacher. And that was not my story, but I knew that there was something about being a minister of the gospel in a church setting to the flock that I needed to be a part of. So fast forward a few years, because I just kind of fought that. I was like, I want to be a pastor, but pastors make zero money, and this business is pretty successful. And I was trying to bargain with myself and God, maybe I could maintain the business and have some sort of itinerant preaching or ministry on the side. And of course, that just was stupid. So Paige and I get married in 1995. I'm 25, she's 24. I'm completely out of school, and we rollick along a while. Finally, in church, we had our pastor that we grew up with had left for another church. Another guy had come by the name of Frank Crawford, and he one morning, I was singing in the choir. Paige was singing in the choir. I was teaching Sunday school. I was very involved with the youth ministry at that time, and I was singing in the choir. And so Frank preaches this message, and basically part of the message kind of revolved around the idea that if you are out of God's will, God will allow you to be miserable in your life. If you are running from God, if you're not doing what He has created you to do, you're going to expect to be in some misery. And that was another one of those times where I was like struck between the eyes, because though I appreciated the job that I had, I was managing the station by then, and there were aspects of that I really enjoyed. It was not fulfilling, and I knew that was not my calling. And I had fought it, and finally I just went and talked to my parents, and I said, look, I know you probably have thought about this, for so many years, and thought this would be a perfect handover and your son would carry on the family business and all those things. But it's just not me. And I thought that they would really be just crushed and that I had disappointed them, but they knew it before I did. They could tell that I was not happy and I wasn't cut out for that. And so they were very supportive. And so I walked away from that business and I went into doing title work for a while. My cousin was an attorney by then. And so I spent about 9 months doing that. And long story short, and I'm going to shorten this up, but by At this point, I was 29 and realized that now, having realized I've got to pursue this ministry and throw myself into this and see what God wants in this world for me, I knew that education had to be a part of that. So I was motivated to go back to school, and I went back to Milligan College. It was still Milligan College. It had not gone to Milligan University yet, and did their business administration major for adults, which was night school, still work full time, and I could finish my bachelor's through that vehicle. And I did. And when I did, it was like I've told many students this, the switch flipped for me. Whereas I was always a decent student. Anything that I enjoyed, I would excel at. And if I didn't like it, then I wouldn't do it.
Right.
But when I went back, I did really, really well, and, just milked it for all it was worth. I enjoyed writing papers. I enjoyed engaging with my teachers and all that, and finished my bachelor's and was out about a little while. By then, our church at Calvary Baptist, still involved there, our youth minister left. He and I were close. We sang in a quartet together and things, but he left for another field and left that position open. And because I was involved in teaching Sunday school and stuff, I was part of the search team. And so we began to collect resumes, and we elected a chair of our team and all these things. And that's when I was inundated with, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I remember vividly going to our chairperson's door one day, and we sat down, and she was a dear friend. And I said, I think God's calling me to this position, and I don't know what to do with that. Obviously, I can't be on this team, on this committee, so I guess I need to resign. And one thing led to another. I guess people agreed. And so I began serving Calvary Baptist Church in 2000 as minister of youth and children. And that was after, having volunteered for years before that. But that was the case. And I have to give a lot of credit to Frank Crawford, who is the pastor that I mentioned. He was very generous with his time, with his attention, with his investment in me. He would, we've talked about going along with the pastors on visits and hospital visits and those kinds of things. And he taught me a lot about grief ministry. He taught me a lot about just how to deal with people and meet them where they are. And so I owe a lot of credit to him for giving me an opportunity, because I didn't have any of the things that we were looking for. I didn't have even a bachelor's at that time. Certainly didn't have any seminary. And yet they were very generous and very giving and supportive. So I finished my bachelor's, and I was out maybe a semester, and then I started my MDiv work in North Carolina at Gardner-Webb. Finished that, and ended up being at Calvary in that capacity for 8 years. And so
where about in all of that does Ellie come along?
Well, she was born in 2002. I had been in ministry for 2 years at that time, and was hot and heavy into seminary. So I was traveling. Paige had Ellie in December of 2002. I was in the middle of exams. I remember and I would drive over on early Monday morning and would be in class all day Monday, Tuesday, and then come back Tuesday night. And that was the way the program was set up. And that's really why I went there. And it was hard because, I tried to be supportive and be the 2 a.m. daddy guy and, all that kind of stuff. But I was working at this church full time and in school full time and have a baby. And it's just like anybody else has ever done that and knows it's trying. And there's a lot of late nights and lack of sleep and strained marriage and all those kinds of things. But we persevered, and the church loved us, and I enjoyed my time there. But I got to the point where I knew that I had exhausted. I kind of hit the ceiling with what we were able to do at Calvary. Still have wonderful relationships with them, but I knew that something else had to give, and started praying about it. Started speaking to some ministry cohorts and our associational missionary at the time, and one thing led to another, and that's when I went to Indian Springs Baptist Church in January of 2008. So that's, and I was doing ministry of students still, dropped the children part. I didn't need to do that, but I was minister of students for about 2.5 years. And that's when we merged with another church, and I stepped into a campus pastor role because it just made sense at that moment. And Jason and I have talked about this, and I've talked about this with other people as far as what calling looks like. And for me, it's always been just, this is the season for this, and I did that for a while. It's not that I never lost my zeal for students or children. I still love to be a part of that. But I knew that when the campus pastor thing came along, it just fit me like a glove, because I knew that community. I knew the DNA of the church, and I knew that we needed to try to maintain some continuity across these campuses. And Rock Collins and I had a camaraderie, and he trusted me. And so that's when I moved in that role. And I guess people agreed that would be an appropriate thing. And I did that for almost 9 years there. And then moved into an associate's pastor's role. He left, and we went through some upheavals, which I won't go into, but we ended up being in a situation where I was an interim for a period of time, a couple of different times throughout that process. And another pastor came, and then he was there for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and then he left, and I did some interim again. And I knew after 14 years there that eventually that season was over, and there were lots of things that built up to that to let me know that. But God has a way of just creating an unsettledness in your spirit. And I knew that I probably needed to do something else because I didn't want it to get to a point where I couldn't go back to this church. Thankfully, I've never left a place that I didn't want to go back to or couldn't go back to. You know what I mean? I left on good terms, and then that's when the door opened here. Go ahead.
That brings us to the precipice of the great move.
Yeah.
I know, and I think most people who know you have gotten to know you. Obviously, Kingsport is where your heart is. It is where you've lived your entire life until a year ago. That is not an easy thing to go where, your parents were pillars of the community and where you grew up and then did ministry for that many years in 2 different churches. And to follow the call of the Lord, I can only imagine that it is not easy to make that, even as much as you can feel the clarity from the Lord. It's still you still got to be the one who pulls the trigger.
Yeah. Sure.
So talk to us a little bit about that decision, and then, getting here. Obviously, your daughter's in school at UT, so you're a little closer to her, and just all the things that go into bringing you here.
Yeah, it was not an easy decision. When that feeling of unsettledness came, and I knew that I needed to do something, certainly wasn't to the point that I was just willy-nilly throwing my resume everywhere, because I didn't really need to do that at that moment. I was just going to be very, I guess, picky about the things that I felt like fit who I was and what I needed to do. And so I had just a smidgen of a relationship with Corey through some what do you call them?
The circles we run in, the TBMB,
yeah,
the
because of
Tennessee Baptist
committee, it's
Mission
committee stuff. I was
boring stuff.
I was a part of a committee that had to deal with what Corey did and his committee and his positions in the state. And so we did a lot of Zoom. This was right during COVID stuff, and we did a lot of Zoom stuff together. And so I learned who he was, and I had an appreciation for the way that he carried himself. And somehow, whenever I found that this church was looking for someone, because at that time he was not here yet, I just finally figured out, hey, this is Corey and this is Seymour, which is, just an hour and a half down the road from us. And it was a discipleship pastor position, which is kind of what my background was and what I was passionate about. And so we thought about it. But I mean, I grew up in Kingsport, lived there all my life. God saw fit to keep me there for those many years. We've talked about the radio thing. I was on the radio for 20 years there. I was very involved in Dobbins Bennett High School athletics and the radio broadcasts for Dobbins Bennett, and that in the business. I mean, people jokingly call me the unofficial mayor of Kingsport because of this. There's a lot of people that I know and have maintained relationships with there and love it there. Still to this day, love it. It's a wonderful place to raise a family. But I guess I can only just say, maybe this sounds like Sunday school answer, but I mean, I finally realized that it was more important for me to follow God's call than for me to be comfortable. Mm. And so we prayerfully, I sat down, I remember sitting down with Paige and Ellie, because this is a decision for the whole family. And even though Ellie was already down here in her freshman year at University of Tennessee, maybe sophomore year by then, it was something, she can't go back home now. She's going to have to come, our home is going to be here. And so, but they were very much in my corner in terms of understanding and seeing this was necessary. And so, made the decision and just left it in the Lord's hands. And obviously, you guys went through the process, and it's interesting for me to hear how, you all went through a process that was fairly protracted and kind of got close on a couple of people and was like, no, this is really not going to fit. And then my resume comes in kind of late in the game from what I understand. And, the rest is history. But, it was like God was saying, are you willing to put me ahead of the comfort of all the trappings that I have garnered in my life up to that point, and the ability that I had to do that and going in any grocery store and seeing, half a dozen people that and having that relationship. Are you willing to lay all that down and follow me? And he said yes.
A little bit like Abraham.
Yeah. And we said yes. And, we left a lot there, but I'm telling you, we're just a little over a year in now, and it is unbelievable just how God has blessed that decision. We've all talked about it. It's almost like we talk about it ad nauseum now, yeah. But the camaraderie and the relationships that we've been able to establish, just amongst us and our spouses on staff, is something that is to be cherished and understood, that this doesn't happen in a lot of places. And then you move to the greater church and just how God is moving in the midst of that, and me doing what I do, being able to utilize a lot of the gifts that He's given me in a lot of different ways, and thinking, I'll probably never be able to do this again. And here I am doing these things again, and God using that and blessing that. And it's exciting. It's energy giving. It's the synergy that we have working off of each other. And, I love helping you in worship ministry. I love us thinking about missions together. I love, kind of coming alongside Corey and, helping shape certain aspects of sermon series and things like that. And anything that I can do to bring whatever God's given me, to the table and just raise the level of what we're able to do, then that's a bonus.
Yeah. Okay. I assume we're
way over.
nearing that. No, this has been good, man. So talk to me about, you asked me at the end of mine, how do people plug into ministry?
Yeah.
I think, we spent a whole episode talking about D groups, and that's, let me actually push pause on that, what I'm saying there. And I would say on my side, watching, when we began to say, I've been a part of churches as they've hired other staff members. Different churches work different ways with regard to that, but for the most part, a pastor leads that charge, and that pastor maybe has a committee, maybe he brings in his own person, doesn't work through a committee, or works through a committee, or maybe the committee does it by themselves, however that may go. But usually it's a fairly closed door process. In the process of hiring your position, Corey, we talk about it around here. We all kind of talk together about everything, but he always said it was an open door. I could come into any meetings I wanted to, and generally I didn't. So I didn't even really meet you till the end. But in that process, as we talked as a staff about what the position would be and what roles it would fill, it's cool to see, as like you said, your resume came in late, kind of on the second round almost, and then how you have fulfilled exactly some of the things we were dreamcasting a year ago. We needed somebody just technology-wise who could help, and that has nothing to do with the ministry aspect. We just needed that. Obviously, Mr. Radio here can do that, and it's just been cool to see that from that side of things. Hey, we really hope that hopefully this person can do this, can help us in this area, has some experience with whether it's 2 services or multi-site or whatever, and then boom, here you are, and you've got that experience. So that side has been really cool. But one of the primary things you do oversee is D groups. We've talked a lot about D groups, about people plugging in to D groups, and you helping with that. One of the other things I know that they can do as far as tapping into your area ministry is you help us with lining up all the devotions for MVP, which is a small way that a lot of people can exercise putting voice to their faith in front of people. And so talk to us about some other ways that you as discipleship pastor, what if you can say, hey, this is what I want to help you, Joe, church member, along the road to discipleship. Here's how I can help.
Yeah, I mean, I see my role as being the person who can help to facilitate people's move to deeper walks with Christ. And one of our values, one of our core values is sincere relationships. And we want to move people into those relationships. And it goes from, and I've said this before on here, but you move from the worship experience, which is many people's open door to a church. They come and they sit through a worship experience. They worship with us. But it's more than that. And we want to, the next step would be to visit a Sunday school class. We've got great Sunday school classes. And I was just in a Sunday school conference this past week that inspired me to want to do some more things to continue to develop our Sunday schools. But then get them into Sunday school, and then move from Sunday school into those deeper relationships into discipleship groups, or D groups as we call them, and to fully try to refine and bring out of you all that God has put in you. An MVP devotion is one of those ways that many people go through their life and they know these things to be true, but many times people make it many, many years and never have an opportunity to share their testimony, share a story, to share the gospel with somebody. And though we don't try to go into great grandiose detail on, preaching a message for our MVP devotions, it's that simple next step that you can take, and it's very easy to do. And those are the little things that we can help facilitate. And I think part of where I think our areas cross over is, once we've moved you into a closer and deeper relationship with Christ and with each other, love God, love others, make disciples, then we're going to try to help you to create and understand who you are in Him, and to be able to share that story and put people into the mission field. And that starts here, And that starts in the United States and in some of the regional mission opportunities and community opportunities, regional opportunities, and then internationally that we have in Guatemala and then beyond, wherever that may lead us. But, that's what I'm passionate about, is try to help people make those migrations into deeper levels of faith with Him.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, that gives us a glimpse into the life and the mysteries of the tiger, and been good to get to know you a little better. Hopefully, this gives people a glimpse into the guy that wears his Sansa belt pants on the stage, and so I think we can put a bow on it and call that a day.
Yep, we can. Thanks for sitting down and being generous with your time.
As always, as you hear in the wrap-up comments here, that we'd love for you to reach out to us. You can give us a little like, follow, subscribe, whatever it may be. But if you've got any questions, some dying questions you want to know about Tiger, you didn't answer this. I guess you didn't answer it. Why the beard? We should close with that question, I guess.
Oh, man, I don't know. Why not?
Why not? Fair enough.
God makes it grow on your face. I just cultivate it better than others.
As much also, you should know, men of the church, or ladies, he is passionate about discipling people. He's also passionate about discipling in their beard growth.
Yeah.
And so when he sees a fledgling beard coming in on a man, or one.
Yeah, I try to support.
Tries to support that. My man gave me, when I grow a winter beard every year. My man hooks me up with like the oils and the butters and the combs, because clearly I don't need a comb for anything else. And so if you're wondering about beard care, you can also send those emails.
Holler at me.
Yeah. So all right. Well, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast, and we'll catch you on the next time.
Thank you for listening to Seymour from the Front Pew. Our sole desire for this podcast is to glorify God by educating and encouraging His body. If you would like to learn more about anything you've heard today, feel free to reach out by email at staff@seymourfbc.org or by visiting our website at seymourfbc.org. If you're located near our community and do not have a church home, come worship with us at 10:15 a.m. on Sunday morning. Until then, we pray God's richest blessings on you and yours as you love God, love others, make disciples, and live the life.